And we'll just see if we get any attendees. And you can hold a subcommittee meeting with 2 members of a 3-member body because you have a quorum.
Greg, did you send us the latest iteration of the dimensional requirements?
I'm going to present them all.
Oh, okay.
And so I'll walk through everything we've discussed so far, and we can make some decisions about that as well. So I'm not seeing anybody listed as an attendee yet. So if Beverly does join, we can announce her when she gets here. But this is a planning board subcommittee meeting, particularly on the potential for housing zoning amendments. July 8th, 3 p.m. This meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with the state open meeting law pursuant to section 20 of chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. Additionally, all votes taken by the planning board subcommittee during this and future meetings, remote meetings, will be by roll call vote. If there is a public comment period, if you are calling from a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you're watching on a computer device, there's a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. So now that we've done that, I think, Sean, you're the chair. You want to call to order and announce your members present?
Jane's actually the chair.
Oh, sorry.
You keep promoting me.
It's been so long ago, I couldn't remember.
Let's let Sean have a turn. I vote yes for Sean. I'm serious. Sean, you can be chair.
How about co-chairs? There you go. Great. I love it.
There we go.
It's all you, Sean.
So what did you want me to do, Greg? I'm sorry.
So you can do a roll call of members present.
Okay. Jane.
Here.
And Sean Henry.
And I am here.
Okay. And also present myself, Greg Kadamtori, Planning Director, and Gemma Wilkins, Staff Planner. So the first thing I thought would be helpful is kind of regroup on all the dimensional discussion that we had in the past, and also give you a little insight into what I think will be really helpful and what a great asset we have in having Gemma aboard, which will be providing a lot more analysis of what the impacts of these potential changes might have. You know, as we talk about changing use allowance or dimensional requirements, what that might mean for you know, the potential for creating units, which is what this whole, you know, effort is about. So now I'm going to share a little PowerPoint presentation that kind of keeps everything on track. Where is it? Screen share. And everybody can see that okay? Oh, we have 2 attendees. Trying to remember if that is Beverly's number.
I can look it up.
If that is Beverly booking at 503-309-4140, if you can press *9 and raise your hand. Otherwise, if somebody chooses to stay anonymous, oh, and they hung up.
Oh.
Maybe it was Beverly and she needs to join as panelist.
She also said she was traveling, so she could have issue with cellular connectivity. So, so maybe somebody else. Can you see the attendees, Sean?
Right now, I'm just seeing one other attendee, Tony Gross.
Okay, but you can see the list. So keep,
yeah,
or maybe Gemma, keep an eye on that in case Beverly comes in. Okay, so this is a little, you know, kind of presentation to kind of review where we were and to provide a little bit more insight. I think what we can provide to the planning board and then ultimately, you know, to the public when we present these things. So I was going to go through some of the 2-family use allowance discussion that we had, which would have an impact in particular on conversions of single family to 2-family, and then talk a little bit about the dimensional requirements for single, 2-family, and 3-family, and you know what might make sense to remove some impediments to the creation of housing in those 3 use categories. And then a little bit about the multifamily requirements that we've talked about, and in particular surrounding 3-family in the smaller lot districts, and also the potential use allowance for 3-family by right in certain districts. Then we could talk a little bit about height and then close out with Gloucester Station overlay districts. So that's fairly meaty, and I think we'll probably need a whole another meeting on that. But I would start by going through some of the dimensional work and stop me as we go along. So I've kind of excerpted our use tables from our current ordinance. So this is the 1 and 2 family table, which is table 2.3.1. And this is how it currently looks right now. If you were to go on to the city website and have a look, this is what you would find. You can see that there are 3 separate categories of uses surrounding the 2-family allowance. One is conversion of a dwelling without any exterior change, and there's a certain amount of allowance for that to occur in most all of the residential districts, except for the RC 40, which is the rural coastal or residential coastal district. Conversion of a 1 to a 2 with changes, and you see that in certain districts that changes to a special permit requirement. And then for a new 2-family, we have pretty much across the residential districts the allowance, again, except for the exception of the RC 40 district. So from the Wayback Machine, when we had these discussions with Judy some time ago, there is this uniformity clause of you can treat the same use differently in different districts, but within the same district, you should have, kind of parity or consistency with that use. And so, this may have been a relic, or when the 2-family came into existence as allowed by right, again, there were these other 2 categories of how 2-family was permitted. And it may be that there was a new line item and not a lot of consideration for the other 2 scenarios. So her guidance was, again, and this certainly would have an impact if the intention is also to utilize the built environment where there's an existing single family that can be added on to for a 2-family, rather than what we have seen a fair amount of, which is a structure taken down and a new 2-family built because it's allowed as of right, versus having to go for a special permit to alter a structure. So the recommendation was across the board in the residential districts to allow the 2-family in any way, shape, or form, whether it's a conversion in an existing structure with no exterior change, or a conversion by adding an addition or a new 2-family, be allowed as of right. So it's basically taking these 3 categories of 2-family use and collapsing them into one line item. And I've only displayed the residential districts or districts that allow for mixed use. They would still be prohibited in all the other industrial and business districts. So I can stop there.
Ask a question.
Yep.
Here. So under new business, under neighborhood business, on line 4 in the first table, you have special permit, but now you're saying amend it to be yes.
Yeah. So right
allowed,
now,
and
go ahead.
I previously I thought they were all yes, and we decided to change them to special permit. That's my printout of the
in the NB district.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that CB, VB, and NB were all yes, and we decided in October to change it to special permit. That's where our discussion left off.
Okay.
Which is maybe neither here nor there, but I appreciate what you're saying about consistency. So shouldn't neighborhood business be the same as center business and village business?
So the neighborhood business districts are very often kind of embedded and borrow from the standards. Wow, I'm really echoing somewhere. that me? Oh, okay.
I just turned my mic on because I think Beverly might be in. Her number might be in. Does this
Okay.
look like her number? Should I just allow to talk and see?
Yes.
Is this Beverly? I think you can talk now. Asta.
Maybe not. Maybe she's
Maybe
just
not.
listening. Okay. Can you mute again, Gemma?
Hi, I'm here. I'm
Oh,
here.
good.
That is Beverly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've
good.
been here, but
Okay.
I'm on the phone and can't see your thing.
Yes.
But
Okay.
I was listening, trying to follow it. Okay.
Okay,
but
great.
I have been here. I didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. So, and if you want to talk, you can participate. So, and again, I think the unique neighborhood business is a little bit different because it is usually abutting or almost embedded in a residential district. If you look at our zoning map, so they are more typically, they may have been in a situation where there may have been a commercial use on the first floor and a residential use above. And so again, I mean, that's something to consider in terms of, we have limited commercial districts and, that's one of them. And I think you're right. We may have gone, and that's why we're kind of coming back together again, because it's been a while. So I will certainly make a note on that one to kind of double check the notes from the last meeting. And so we had an SP across those last 3 districts, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
And then you've added here a footnote 3, or is the footnote 3 already there?
So so the footnote 3 is already in the table now, and it covers.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and it covers those all of the 2-family right now.
And the footnote 3 is not more than one principal building or lot, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. That's all my questions.
Okay.
Except that I think RC 40 already is a yes. So why is that circled?
No, actually, it's not. Right now,
Oh.
you cannot have a 2-family in the RC. So that's kind of one of those open questions. It's been retained as a single family district, and this would permit 2-family in that district.
Okay. Right.
Okay. And this is just kind of a summary of what we intend to do. So there's no question that there's nothing but potential here in terms of if you're allowing a conversion that's no longer to have a special permit requirement, that likely could be an impediment. And in particular, for those with an addition associated with them. So one of the things that Gemma has been working on is looking a lot at the potential of these decisions, kind of looking at as we get into the dimensional stuff, it's even I think more important to understand, as you consider how many lots out there that are undeveloped that will, now be able to have the potential for a 2-family, for instance, or, the impact of the allowance of conversion and what that might mean. Obviously, we're not anticipating that every single lot, is going to be converted. But it's nice. I think it's helpful to see kind of the order of magnitude of what the potential is. And again, this is all under the umbrella of, the 1 to the 2, if that's accepting in most districts and allowed as of right now in most districts. This seems like, one of those changes that, again, I think we're still, the city kind of, as you look at our zoning map, we tend to have higher density in the core. And then as you go, out from there up towards Lanesville down to West Gloucester, or Magnolia and over to West Gloucester, the density obviously decreases based on lot size. So, but we will be able to kind of provide kind of a mini build out to show, what the potential is there. Because we know that it certainly will be, folks will have a new decision that they can make in terms of putting an addition on a structure to convert to a 2-family and that type of thing.
Greg, can you go back to the table for the previous
Yep.
table? I think I misread my notes. So,
Okay.
sorry, I have it all color coded. What we decided actually was in CB and VB to do yes.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, we had said yes across.
So I think
Okay.
maybe what we can do is we can kind of park that, and when we have a better
Okay.
handle on those districts in particular, what that would mean,
Okay.
if there are singles in those districts that it would make sense for them to convert, we can provide some numbers to go along with it.
Okay, great. Yep.
Okay. So one of the other things that I know has kind of come into the discussion a little bit is with the consideration of this, because this is one part, we're just dealing with 2-family use allowance, and then we get into some of the proposed dimensional changes that also could promote the allowance in districts where right now it's inhibited by the need for increased lot area. That whether or not there needs to be any consideration for design standard or footprint limitation. This is something, it's not like this doesn't come up at city council hearings on applications, zoning board applications, even planning board, that, right now, the two things that we have to control massing of buildings is really lot coverage and height. And so, I think we've heard this also in terms of, some of the smaller lot districts or lots that have been undersized, and again, they get some sort of relief from the zoning board, or even a 10,000 square foot lot district where, you have the allowance to put, a 5,000 square foot home on it just based on the numbers alone. If you were to maximize the footprint of the structure at, a 2,500 square foot foundation, 2 floors, and whether or not there needs some consideration for that. Obviously, as you go up into the larger lot districts, these can be pretty significant structures, and whether or not that's something to be thinking about or consider. So I kind of put that out there. I mean, that's, as we're considering the allowance of certain uses as of right, whether there's also, maybe a consideration for, what that impact might be, in these generally existing 1- and 2-family neighborhoods on the size of structures. There's definitely probably a few examples people have either asked you about or, mentioned in terms of, how big some of these structures can be. And again, you can also think of the example of an oversized lot in a district, where again, they're held to that 25%. So there could be 2 3,000 square foot units, attached on a larger lot. So again, one of the ways that can be dealt with is looking at the lot coverage requirement, or which something would be fairly new, would be kind of like a floor area ratio where there's some ratio between lot size and the amount of square footage that can be put on a lot. So I just put that out there for you to think about. And I think when we come back again with, the analysis of numbers and what that impact would be like, I think, Judy kind of left these as the potential for, particularly with like 3-family or something like that, whether or not there would be kind of an administrative site plan review aspect to it. But I think it's worthy of thinking about, how the addition of additional units in neighborhoods plays out. And with very, with not changing anything other than use allowance and maybe being more forgiving on dimensional requirements, this is the type of thing that would be permitted. Again, 25% is pretty liberal in terms of what it can promote in terms of the size of a structure.
And
Not-
is
Go
the
ahead.
motivation behind that limitation to, in theory, to attempt to keep things moderately affordable, so you don't have a gargantuan 6,000 square foot house?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, part of it would be is, and we will hear, I always say, we will hear loud and clear on some of these proposals, whether they're accepting or not. But if there was a district that allowed a 3-family as of right, which is not allowed right now, it's by special permit. If you also consider these dimensions, you may result in smaller units. For instance, that again might be, relate to also affordability. I mean, if you were able to, if it was a ratio, and right now I can build a 5,000 square foot house on a lot, or, I'm kept to that, then I would, essentially have to have 3 smaller units than that. But the question is that 5,000 too much already? So, I mean, that's one where, I mean, it's not uncommon and we could certainly pull examples of, a 15% or 20% lot coverage. It has a pretty significant impact because that would maximize at 3,000, for instance. And again, if you were going into a multi, then it would be a 1,000 square foot unit, which, could be likely a 2-bedroom unit, probably not a 3. So those types of considerations. So it's about what do you want the intended result to be? And you have that ability, again, you're saying you can go do it. You have the ability to say, well, here's what we want it to look like, or here's how we want to have added units to the housing stock. We have not enough that are, 2-bedroom, rather than a 4-bedroom house, a 5-bedroom house. So there's a trade-off there for somebody making that decision. And I mean, 3-family is probably, again, probably not likely that you're going to have a family say, I'm going to go from a 1 to a 3, and with an addition. I mean, it's probably more, that's more a development and sale. So think about that. Because we have so much allowance for 2-family right now, the only thing I think we also want to just make sure that we consider, a lot of times I think when people, again, even with the analysis of conversions and that type of thing, we think about existing lots, but kind of just backtracking or back calculating to make sure that any of these changes in use allowance and density or dimensional requirements, how they relate to subdivision as well. We've certainly seen some cases where it seems like a calculation comes up with a number that's maybe beyond capacity for a property. And so making sure that, as we do these things, we keep that in mind. When you're dealing with,
Greg.
yes.
I just wanted to mention too that we now have accessory dwelling unit provisions, and so you're talking about a single house, somebody with a single family house wanting to expand. Option number 1 is to expand as a accessory dwelling unit, but limited by the size, maximum size. Yep. And that the 2 would then apply to anything bigger than that, assuming that the reason that I am expanding here is to achieve a comparable sized house or a close to comparable, as opposed to an ADU. And I don't know to what degree, I'm not seeing the table we're talking about, but I don't know what degree that we inform the zoning code that an ADU under 25% of the size of the existing or whatever is not involved in this. It's anything bigger than an ADU, right?
Yeah. So, most of the districts allow the 2-family as of right now. It has an implication for, obviously, for ownership. It's something that could be sold. And we limited that accessory dwelling unit and potential standalone accessory dwelling unit to single family lots.
Okay.
So you could only do one as a part of a single family or as a detached on a single family lot, but we did not extend that to two family lots. So it's kind of, again, they're all options, and it's giving people a lot of flexibility to figure out how they want to potentially accommodate family on a lot or a rental unit and that type of thing. But this would be, again, just kind of consolidating the allowance of two family.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on that? And I will move on. So this is a fairly significant one, which we talked about. And again, over time, it seems like, with the allowance of two family, we go from the city center core that has a lot of three family, multifamily, still single and two. And then as you go further out into the rural districts, primarily single family, and, in a lot of ways because of this table specifically, and this is table 3.2.1, that's the dimensional requirements for 1, 2, and 3 family. And we have this situation in the R30, RC40, and R40 and R80, where for each dwelling unit, you have to essentially have the equivalent of the minimum lot size for the area. So if I wanted to put a two family in an R40 district, I actually need 80,000 square feet. So one of the recommendations was to kind of minimize or basically say, if you have a compliant lot like you do in the R10 or the R20, if you meet the minimum lot area requirement for the district, you could put in a 1 or a 2 family. And again, this is something that Gemma will be able to kind of give a sense of what the impact of that is in terms of compliant lots, lots that have single families on them that might be able to be converted. And a lot of this is also the caveat of there's obviously other jurisdictions that may limit the ability of an individual property owner. Septic capacity. You want to add bedrooms, you have to modify your septic system, and that's not always possible on every lot. Conservation jurisdiction, for expanding the footprint of a structure or permitting a new structure. Floodplain requirements. So again, this, the numbers that I think we're going to be able to provide are going to look probably dramatic because we can't kind of factor every one of these variables into the analysis. We can continue to try to refine it a little bit more, but I think it'll give you a sense of a kind of like order of magnitude of what the potential is now and how this kind of adds potential with these proposed changes. So this was kind of a consolidated table that that Judy had provided, which kind of almost gets you there, but essentially, in those districts, the minimum lot, instead of going with a lot area per dwelling unit, her kind of thought was to change the dimensional requirement to the minimum lot area per unit in excess of 2. So that would get you towards, and you can see that for R10 through R80, it's 0. So again, each lot in that district could have a 1 or 2 family. Dealing with it in 2 ways. One, consolidating all those types of 2 family conversion and new, and then also making it clear that if you have a lot that's compliant in any one of the residential districts, it would be allowed without any additional lot area requirement. So, any questions there? I think I have a summary slide that maybe.
Yeah, and you're also proposing, wait, can you go back?
Yep.
You're proposing to remove footnote F, right? Which said
Yeah.
2 family was not allowed in R40.
Correct.
And
Yeah,
it's
so
under,
Yeah, so I tried to highlight the things that, and and I think I have a note on the next one, or maybe I missed it, but yeah, that's the other, that footnote in particular just says no two family.
Right. Okay.
So again, the real impact of this would be, R30 and above that, and I can recall probably about 13 years ago, somebody coming in North Gloucester and was just shy of meeting the requirement of doubling the area in an R40 district. And again, just, that's the reality. You'd have to go get zoning relief for lot area for a 2-acre property to add a unit, and also get a special
That's
permit for the
ridiculous.
conversion. Yeah. So, I mean,
That's ridiculous.
so, that's, again, there are certainly limitations in these areas, just by topography, septic system siting, and other jurisdictions. But, this is that question of, if you're on a 30,000 square foot lot plus, you be allowed to potentially have a 2-family. So that's a clear one that Gemma will be able to show you kind of the numbers of what that potentially does. And again, we tie 1 and 2 family and other permitting vehicles like cluster and OSRD to the lot area requirement and not the lot area per unit requirement. So that's something that I would just also want to make, very clear, again, because the reason for, using those things is really about efficiency of utility and minimizing cost by a compact development. And so certainly don't want to get in a situation where we make a change in one place of the ordinance and that results in, again, having an unrealistic calculation of units and then trying to rectify that, through a permitting process. So we're certainly keeping an eye on the other permitting vehicles and how they relate in the ordinance to the dimensional tables. Again, this goes back to, that lot coverage, or whether there's consideration for design in the allowance in a lot of these areas. Again, what do you want to see in terms of the type of housing that gets allowed in these areas that it's otherwise been fairly restricted? So that will go back to considering, either a ratio or a coverage or something along those lines, if that's something that you'd recommend. So I can stop on that one. Moving right along. So here's another one that Judy actually didn't really come up with or recommend, but as from your experience on the planning board, and I remember putting this up on a whiteboard when we actually met in person a long while back. So we have a difference between our frontage requirement and our lot width requirement, which you may have recognized from all the plans that come to you every 2 weeks, that they're often very funny shapes. And the reason is you can't take a rectangular piece of property and divide it up into 2 smaller rectangles without doing some math, because you have a difference between the frontage requirement and the lot width requirement. So a very crude example is this graphic, where because the frontage requirement is less than the lot width requirement, you end up with these kind of, in a perfect world, you end up with a trapezoid where the structure has to be sited further back on the property than maybe even the front yard setback, because you have to satisfy this lot width requirement. In our R5 district, we don't have a difference, and that's where you see, the older parts of the community developed most like, well, not always first, but maybe more planned as initially as 5,000 square foot lots. It looks very grid. The structures all have, very regular position on the street, meeting the front yard setback. And so instead we have this situation where as you go up in the dimensional requirements for larger lots. Frontage is one that's fairly obvious in terms of frontage and lot area in reducing density. But then there's this added one just in terms of how to divide property, where it often results in people looking for relief for lot width, because again, when you're working with inside a box, it's hard to satisfy two lots to meet both a frontage and lot area requirement. Sometimes what it results in is one structure closer to the street, one structure further back, and in some cases, a property that might be able to be divided in three, if there was parity between frontage and width, can only be divided in two because of this just being confounded by lot width. So that's a kind of a new one. It really is more a function of division of property, which may result in new units of housing, but something to think about. It is certainly one of all the dimensional, kind of things. It's very clear. I need 20,000. I need 30,000. That type of thing. But this is one that really, it's almost like a works program for our local land surveyors, because they have to come up with the mental math and then put it on paper as to how to satisfy that. So that's a fairly, it's just something else to consider. It would have a long-term impact. It would certainly make things a little bit simpler in terms of preparing a plan for division. So that's something to consider. So that kind of covers everything with 1 and 2 family that we had been discussing. And yes.
Sorry. So back in when we last did this,
yep.
Judy had proposed. Can you go back to your table that was the one before this? Didn't Judy propose relief for height?
That's
one.
That's at the
coming?
yeah,
Okay.
That's coming. Yep.
Okay. Sorry.
Yep. That's okay. So I was going to go with a little bit of discussion about multi and then height.
Right.
And
sorry.
Again, this is the way my brain thought of it, but could have done height at the same time with 1 and 2 family. But multifamily, the big one is really the use allowance part of it. The consideration in R10 and R20 from the use allowance perspective. I know I'm putting up a dimensional table because I'm not sure if I prepared a slide for that one. Which again would get back to a little bit of the discussion earlier about lot coverage and what that would result in terms of unit size and that type of thing. But there were 2 different things that Judy said and we know this, and Gemma can provide the number as well. We currently have a requirement of 10,000 square feet for a multifamily in R5, which there are very few lots that meet that requirement. But there was some discussion about whether or not there needed to be some additional lot area for multifamily. So whether or not, again, can you propose a 4 to 6 family unit on a 5,000 square foot lot, or should there be some additional lot area? And her approach was to have additional lot area for each unit of 3 family or greater of 1,000 square feet. And that, again, we can take a closer look on whether that really relieves anything or not. Right now for special permitting for multifamily, it goes to the city council. They have the ability to relieve lot area per dwelling unit and open space per dwelling unit, but they don't have the relief on minimum lot area. So that's where, it requires that trip to the zoning board and then to the city council. And so we can kind of see what the impact of that would be for the addition of a unit, maybe a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a 5, and hopefully kind of deal with some of that dimensional, kind of relief that's needed, and really focus more on what's typically focused on. And there's Beverly Bookin, welcome. And focusing on more on, the issues that typically come up in terms of parking, code compliance, access, things that really are more associated with the structure, and then also site related issues in terms of driveways and parking and that type of thing. So that's one where, again, it was, here's something that I think would help. And again, now I think we're going to be in a better position to kind of see how that plays out, if it really does provide some relief or not, by kind of focusing a little bit more on the eligible properties that might be able to take advantage of it. And so that's the bulk of the, just dealing with units, other than the big one in there is the allowance in R10 and R20. So that wouldn't require anything other than the same size. I'm sorry. So there is a little bit of a requirement of additional lot area for 3-family. But the allowance piece is the big one there. So that's kind of something that we should really think about as we go forward, in terms of, we know where those R10 and R20 districts are there, and whether or not that's a use that you think should be permissible in those districts as of right. And then across the board, Judy's suggestion was to allow the increase of height to 35. Again, because of what that does for the potential for a 3-family structure, that, there's a lot of relief that's sought between 30 and 35 at the Zoning Board of Appeals. If it's being granted, is that something that makes sense to allow, for essentially a 3rd floor? A lot of times they're dormered, may still require, dormering for a structure, but that the height limitation of 30 is comparatively, in a lot of communities, the height limitation is 35.
Well, and in a mixed use building, you want your ground floor to be 15 feet, 12 to 15, 14 feet ground floor, and then, 2 10-foot floors for residential brings you to 34. And
Yep.
so it makes more sense. A ground floor at 10 feet is kind of skimpy.
So is ZBA granting a lot of height relief?
I mean, I think it happens often. And, part of that is also, we don't have a lot of flat lots in Gloucester. So the calculation of height, takes into consideration all the corners of a proposed building. And, if you're on a slope, it kind of, you get leveled out. You may gain or lose depending upon what the existing lay of the property is. So I could probably, again, data is a great thing. We can take a look at, pick a, maybe, even though the permitting level didn't seem to change a whole lot over the last year, but maybe we could go a couple of years back, just get a sense of how often it's requested and how often it's granted.
I think that would be great, especially in particular districts, because I think raising the height restriction is a tough one because, well, it's very divisive, especially with people who feel they have views.
Yep.
So if we could find out if there's like more ask in a particular district than in another district, or more
Yep.
relief granted in a particular district than in other districts.
Sure, we can do, maybe we'll just create a map with a distribution, and then maybe look at what was requested. And then there's those that have gone to the city council for 35 and greater. They tend to be, there's fewer for residential projects, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I think
I should say for 1 and 2 family.
To Beverly's point, I think though that it increasing it to 35 would make for much more comfortable and attractive living spaces. As somebody who is currently sitting in a 650 square foot condo downtown, I can tell you it's much more livable because it's got a 10-foot ceiling.
I think in some districts it's totally appropriate, but just in some it might not be.
But I think just recently we had the application go through, actually where they came back and changed their application because of threats of lawsuits. They multi-family development on the back shore where they were, I think, at 34 feet, 33, 34,
Yeah, I
and
remember.
had to flatten it out, which
Yeah,
was
and it
gonna
looked
reduce.
terrible. I mean, it looked worse. Yeah.
Well, look,
Oh,
looks
that, you mean the really spendy ones on
Yeah.
Atlantic Road, Atlantic
Uh,
Street, where they had a.
Atlantic Road.
shore and,
Yeah.
and road.
Yeah,
So
by the
ones that
way,
face you-
by the way, 10 and 10 doesn't give you a 10-foot ceiling because you need
right.
about a half a foot of interstitial space
Right.
between floors for, every, pipes and soundproofing and whatever. So, if you have a 10 foot floor to floor, the finished height is probably more like 9 or 8.5 or 8 3/4. But your point is well taken. But basically, and these are all residential zones. The 35 is not necessarily going to have a 12-foot ground floor, but certainly over in mixed use in the right-hand side here, a 15-foot minimum ground floor creates the kind of visual. I mean, it just look to have a commercial space that is 10 feet would just look out of scale, right? So
again, this is just for 1, 2, and 3 family. So we'll have a whole separate discussion about,
okay.
like the mixed use districts, the train station area, downtown district. But this is more kind of a function of residential district and the potential for, for space in a 3 family, that type of situation. But I think it'll be helpful to kind of give a sense of how often, where those requests have been made and whether they're granted or not.
Let me ask a question about how you measure height. Let's say you have a 3-story structure and you have a sloped roof. And let's say that sloped roof at the peak of the roof is 10 feet and the edges are, on top of the 30. At least the way that I've always seen it measured is in a sloped roof, you take the height as half the distance. So in a 35 foot, you have 3 10 feet and essentially a 5-foot roof. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Because
I do.
Yeah, this shaped roof doesn't damage the view shed in the way that a full story would. Is that how it's measured?
No.
No. Okay,
I
well,
believe,
it should be.
Yeah.
It should be. Most zoning codes do it that way. Many zoning codes do it that way. All right.
I'll just tell you exactly what it says, because it's kind of a squirrely thing. So in the case of a flat roof, the vertical distance measured from the average grade prior to building construction to the highest point on the roof assembly, including parapets. In the case of a sloping roof, the vertical distance measured from the average grade prior to the building construction to the highest point of the peak or ridge.
Wow. Yeah.
So that, again, I think that's that kind of balance of, again, there have been instances where somebody maximizes the space by building a flat roof. And again, if you don't care what it looks like, that's fine, but that's potentially one of the implications. Or it's giving somebody 5 more feet to also build a flat roof. So there's kind of a trade-off there.
And then there's average grade too, because that's from the 4 corners of the lot, and
Right.
and some of them are underwater. So
Yeah.
that's all other.
Well, and I guess this also is that question of which has come up already, and so it could be kind of multi-pronged in approach. One dealing with the allowance of floor space on a 3rd floor. The other is whether or not there's going to be the need for elevating of structures, more so than in the past. And does that 35 feet give people the opportunity to do that, and then really have to present a case, for something more extreme beyond that point? But again, the perception of a 31-foot building, a 32-foot building over a 30-foot building is,
De
30
minimis.
to a 35. Yeah, but take a ride. Either go look at a proper, a structure that was permitted at that height, or surrounding communities that's the norm and allowed. And it's not. I don't think you feel like you're driving down and have these massive structures kind of bearing down on you.
We have another consideration. If you're going to have a twoplex or a threeplex, let's say a threeplex, you assume they're side by side. They take up much more side area, right, side by side, but they don't but they don't hit the height. And so you have less permeable surface. It's more efficient to build it on top, like a three flatter, right? And that's when you start to get into height problems. Now, I don't know if our code allows three flatters, like, the traditional three flatter that you see in Boston or not, whether they've got to be side by side.
I don't think there'd be any prohibition. And we generally, I think townhouse style is probably what we would see, just in terms of, it seems like the amenities that people are looking for are, garage and, entry into your own unit rather than having to go upstairs through a corridor. But, that's most of what we see.
Now, I can think of one, a very luxurious one back from Atlantic Street, which is a very luxurious 2-unit that's, they have the garages on the ground floor, and unit 1 is on the second floor, and unit 2 is on the 3rd floor. So, it's not that it can't be designed that way.
Yep. So that is most of the discussion related to 1, 2, and 3, and use allowance and dimensions. And again, I think, the next time we schedule a meeting, we can give you a better sense of what we think the potential is there for the impact of those things. But if there's, we start small with the subcommittee to say, yeah, we think this is a good idea to bring to the full board. We'll do a similar discussion at that level before obviously anything goes further. But so I think the big ones that stand out to me are the relaxation of the lot area requirement in the larger districts for the allowance of 2-family and the 3-family in the R10 and R20. The one that I haven't really given you an idea of yet, but is in terms of the frontage and lot area requirement, and lot width requirement. I wouldn't want to really change much in the way of the frontage requirement because that then creates nonconformity if you start ratcheting up in anywhere. But the question is, if you can site a structure on a lot with a requirement of 50 feet in an R5 district, can you site a structure on a lot with a 65-foot lot width in an R10 district, and then kind of parity going up from there? It goes to 80, then to 100, and up to 150 in the larger lot district. So if you were just change that one dimension to be equal to the frontage requirement, again, that would not always the favorite thing that we see in terms of A&R development, but it certainly would create the opportunity for more lots to be created.
Hey, Greg, quick question on going back to the height. Have there been any court decisions in the state regarding computing height with regard to the flood levels now? That basically an argument being made by a property owner saying I should get my height plus the flood zone?
I don't think there's been any any court cases on it. There have been actually some communities that have tried to incentivize elevating of structures by making a more generous allowance for height. I think Hull has an example of that where they've cut building permits or discounted building permits and then allowed for an increase in height in those situations. It may be something that's a little bit more predictable in some areas that are, their topography is, they have some neighborhoods that are fairly flat that this occurs in. So it's a little bit more, I think it's a little trickier just because of our shoreline. But I don't think anybody's just said, you absolutely have to let me do this. But there's some communities that have moved in the direction of trying to, if somebody wants to do that, the proactive thing and invest in a structure and protect it better, provide some incentive or relaxation.
I thought there was that 2-family on Washington Street by Hodgkins Cove that is on stilts because it was out of the FEMA flood zone, but it still got a 30-foot height up top of the stilts.
They had to go for an exception, so they weren't granted anything, but they went and made that case.
I thought that was a court case. I thought that was a land use court case, and then there was another one at Wingersheek, but I don't know how it came out.
Yeah, I mean, I think again they're asking for the height, but I don't think they were demanding the height based on that. They were saying, hey, here's a condition, and we're asking for this, and then it's just a matter of how it got kind of arbitrated in terms of yes, you can have it, or no, you can't. Mm-hmm. So I think I want to say in that first example, the height of the building actually may have come down, and they may have utilized that 30-foot requirement, which kind of shrunk them down a little bit because I think they may have been appealed and then just brought it back down so that they could build the structure.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. I think that's my recollection, that they reduced the height to be within the 30-foot.
Yeah. So think about all that. It's a lot to think about.
Are you going to upload your presentation so we can?
I can. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I'll create it into a PDF and I'll post it to the planning board page. I was working on it.
5 minutes.
It's been a very, very busy spring and summer and complicated in a lot of ways. So I just kind of touched it before we got here. And then the last one is, again, this is the basis of what we provided to Judy, and she has provided that fairly meaty draft of what she's termed the Gloucester Station Overlay District. Bandwidth, I've been talking for an hour. So I don't know if maybe we want to set some time. I want to bring her to a subcommittee meeting to kind of have her walk through it. And if you folks have a fair amount of flexibility in afternoons like this, maybe we can schedule another subcommittee meeting to kind of really dig into the meat of that. The boundary of it is fairly consistent with what we had worked on with MAPC a few years back. And again, we're kind of also looking at this through the lens of the newly passed, MBTA communities in terms of trying to make sure that anything that we prepare for this will kind of comply with the rough outlines, guidelines that they've provided in terms of trying to increase density around the train station area.
What do you mean MAPC a few years ago?
So we had, it was probably before you were on the planning board. So we had done some work on a downtown kind of marketing study. They were kind of going through and evaluating the potential for TOD in a number of different communities. So, kind of provided some visuals and examples of what things could look like in certain areas. I think I shared a presentation, but I can also put it in in the planning board drive as well, with kind of some of the ideas of, what this could be like. We are, it's in a lot of this consideration, other than right around the train station, we obviously have a fair amount of housing around our train station within walking distance. So, it's a little bit tighter than you might see in some other communities that, were maybe a little bit less, have less density to begin with, that we're trying to create districts around the train stations. So we had kind of that first level analysis already and some drafting of an approach, and we did not bring it to fruition.
And so the map came from there, the borders of,
it's fairly coincident with an area boundary that we had already kind of looked into. So again, it's one of those things where there's still, kind of eligibility, lot size, density parameters. So not every property, can take advantage of pursuing it. But it kind of covers, some of the areas that we've been talking about in terms of the Maplewood Avenue corridor. I got here just as Whistle Stop Way had been permitted. So it's, that would have been one of those areas that there could have been, more consideration for housing at the time. It was zoned as a commercial district, and when it's zoned as a commercial district, you get commercial uses. So, that's the idea of, it's something over time. I mean, it may not happen in the next couple of years. We've certainly seen some interest in introducing housing in this area. So maybe some properties might advance before others, but, starting to look at, also if that's, again, the goal is to increase housing in the district, what you balance in terms of density that's permitted, how it's permitted, and the trade-off for that in terms of what you're looking for a project to also add, to the area.
Can I assume the Joel Ferraza thing this is not at all related to the Joel Ferraza?
I mean, so I mean, this, this work and thought about this district precedes that by several years. And this is also something that was also identified in the housing production plan. Again, it's thinking about those areas, and I in those discussions, it was also, if we need new housing, new units of all different types, of all different market, price points, these proposals aren't really, they're not focused in one area. They are really looking at the opportunities throughout the community and what people are willing and will support. So, again, it's examining the areas that make sense in terms of access to amenities, in particular train stations, grocery store, having that ability to do all those things, maybe more compact, more affordable, associated with them, but then also, where is their capacity in the residential neighborhoods for additional units? And I keep pointing out, Gloucester is fairly unique in its allowance for two family. I mean, there's a lot of communities that are only zoned for single family. So there's potential already. There has always been potential. And then, the question is, if you're kind of going to facilitate that further, what's the trade-off, or what are you looking for in terms of, you have the ability to, in some ways, control size of unit, how it fits into these existing neighborhoods in terms of massing or density, and even design considerations if you wanted to go that far as Beverly was pointing out, in terms of townhouse versus flat style for small multifamily projects and that type of thing. So while we certainly have a lot of hitches in our ordinance that have complicated things, we also have a lot of districts that really don't even compare to communities not far, in the surrounding Essex County and beyond that had a lot of 1 and 2 acre zoning. So, I think it is a place that there's a lot of opportunity, not only for property owners that have here and have been here that have a lot of choice and option. And we're talking about even more options. So, I think there's some careful consideration in terms of what you think about in terms of the community aspect and what the community is allowing to occur by making these changes in these neighborhoods, and what you're creating in terms of housing for the region.
I get that, but I think more to the point is by having the ordinance, this draft ordinance you have in front of us is something that's a much more holistic approach. It's Judy did, it's based on what state law allows and what other communities are doing. I mean, it's just a much more comprehensive and holistic planning document, I would think, than Joel's proposal, which really was just to get that orphan property developed. And we had said when we turned it down that we wanted to make this kind of a much more thoughtful, comprehensive, state-of-the-art kind of thing. And I mean, reading it, that's what we try to do here.
Yeah, I mean, it's an odd configuration. I mean, it was the rail runs through it. There are sidings. There was industrial use warehousing in the past, and so you have this kind of odd configuration where you're trying to figure out how do you make sense of this going forward. And as you don't have the magic wand to kind of do it all at once. It is going to be, individual property owners or maybe assemblage or cooperation. How do you develop a pattern that makes sense, that capitalizes on all the things that are there, but also builds a streetscape, a walkable area, connectivity between everything. So that's the approach that we're trying to get at with this proposal.
And I think my recollection is we did this work in like 2014, I think. It's been around for a while. And I think that guy retired. And when he retired mid project, it sort of went to the back burner.
Yeah, but Jane and I both came in on later, so we're not familiar with that
But
work.
I think I've been on the planning board for like 5 years, so might have been before that.
Yeah, and there are other things that have been going on other than this one effort.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
I think 2015, 2016 is when we came on.
Yeah.
That's 5 years. We're in 2021 now.
Yes.
Time flies when you're having fun, as you
So
know.
does.
Right. But I think that the MBTA community plan really advocates for doing something like this. And
I'd love to see it.
encourages increased density and actually because of recent columns and letters to the editor in the newspaper again, I went back and started scanning through what's generally referred to as Plan 2000, but I think it's actually published as Community
2001.
Plan 2001. And there was an encouragement for increased density and infill development like this generated from that plan, and actually encouragement to use clustering to preserve open space in areas like West Gloucester, et cetera. So I think we're on the right track with finally doing these things and permitting some of the projects we permitted that we, despite what you might read in the Gloucester Daily Times, is actually what was encouraged in all those community meetings back in the late 90s and 2000. So.
Well, and I like to, maybe, and again, data is always helpful. We went through when we actually got the assistance to work with Judy. It was because there were 2 thresholds of potential applicants when the governor created the planning for production and this, so you could have. We kind of went through an analysis of what had been developed in the last 5-year look at before they started that program, housing choice program, I should say, sorry. And, you know, it's not that housing hasn't been created in Gloucester over the last 5 years. We generally, you know, see around 60 to 70 units of single and two family in a given year. And then there are the projects that have been, you know, permitted by, you know, city council. And if you just look back, you know, there's been, I think, about 300 units of multifamily plus that have been permitted just in the last probably 3 years. So, you know, I think there in a lot of ways, you know, that has been occurring, but it has been occurring with, you know, a little bit of a tortured path. And so some of this is just, you know, to kind of create some clarity and also, you know, ease some of the things that often result in, you know, heading to the zoning board for, you know, 2 feet here or whatever it might be. And, you know, again, I don't suspect that it'll be interesting that, you know, right now you can buy a single family house in most of these districts, tear it down and put up a 2 family. And I'm sure there are people that don't like that occurring. But if you want to put an addition on a house and comply with everything, but put an addition on a house and convert, you have to go get a special permit. So it's things like that again, if you're fully embracing 2 family allowed in these districts by these proposed changes. And, you know, that in some ways, you know, if it happens, you know, and eventually there's maybe a bigger structure than was allowed or was there before as a neighbor to a project versus getting a notice in the paper that you can go to a hearing and contest something. Again, let's just be clear, either you can do it or you can't do it. And if you want to keep it that way, you know, that's what continues to happen is once it's in the special permit realm, it's a special permit and you get to speak on it. And the irony is if somebody wanted to just tear it down and build new, they can do it. So
Yeah, but as our housing stock increases in value, the economics of buying a house and tearing it down and replacing it are much more daunting than renovating an existing house and expanding.
yeah, I mean, I think it's also, you know, what's the character of the existing structure? Is it a ranch? You know, there are ranch neighborhoods that, you know, again, I think a lot of what we see in 2 family development is really trying to maximize privacy in a 2 family. You know, we see garage between separation and what looks like you know, literally 2 single families attached. But to your point, you know, again, there are probably decisions being made based on the permitting path. And there's the opportunity to have something that maybe is more in character with a neighborhood that's an addition to a structure versus tearing it down and starting new. So that's what I have for today.
Should we, do we take public comment while we're doing this?
You don't have to. There's nothing here that's a public hearing, but it's up to one of the chairs if you wanted to do so.
I think
Fine with me.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I'm glad people are attending this meeting, so I'd love to hear what they have to say if they want to say anything.
So if Sunny or Tony, if you'd like to, oh, there you go. Sunny's there. She's raised her hand, and I will allow her to speak.
Actually, I have a question, which was on the TOD, and is that area definitively designed like that, or why not square it off, taking Prospect all the way over to Washington, Pleasant all the way up to Cleveland, maybe even going all the way up to Derby? Why not have it look like, you know, a district that hasn't just been gerrymandered? Or is there a reason for that shape and designation that I don't remember?
I think it was probably mostly because of proximity and distance to the station itself. And then also some consideration for some of the corridor streets, bounding it. But that's certainly a discussion point. It is draft at this point in terms of how far it goes. But that's something that can be considered. It is, again, I think also, based on, an analysis that MAPC had provided as well in terms of how far to go. But that's, the boundary of it is open to, consideration.
It also seemed like, though, the boundary was, we're talking about adding housing in a place that normally doesn't have housing, whereas those other streets are in fact residential streets that you're talking about, Sunny. But yes, we could totally look at the appropriateness of those boundaries.
Yeah, and it's certainly that's something that I can't completely picture in my head looking here. I know some of those streets that I said, why not include them, are already pretty dense with housing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Isn't the standard about a quarter considered to be a quarter mile walkable from a station? So
that's also the state's kind of guideline that they put out as well in terms of proximity.
So, it would be interesting to take, part of it is that you're starting with a area that isn't square to start with. The streets are at all different angles. So you already kind of have a funny cattywampus situation. But if you were to take the station and you were to draw the quarter mile to
we could do that
outside, then you could see whether or not how much of that we're capturing. And then you do take a look at existing lotting patterns. And, if it's unlikely that you're going to have redevelopment, let's say beyond where you've drawn this line, then to extend it there you could do it, but chances are it won't yield much. So I think,
and I don't think you want to turn residential into mixed use as much as you do want to turn.
Sure.
Mixed use, right?
You want to look at underlying zoning, you want to look at underlying development patterns, but this quarter mile helps you identify the likelihood that people will walk to transit as opposed to drive. And should be the driving standard.
So should we set a meeting date for to nail down some of this and start?
I think
in more detail.
I think one thing is Judy's schedule, because I want to make sure that she's at it. But we can kind of look at a couple of dates, and I'll see if.
Let's get on Judy's schedule for the overlay district, but we can do the other stuff.
Yep.
And might not take that long, right?
We've got time.
Hopefully.
So let me just pull up a calendar.
I'm ready to vote. So
Sean, I said to Gemma before this meeting, I said we're going to go through this, and I said, we want to provide, data, in terms of the impact. And I said, Sean's going to say, why don't we just vote?
Let's just do it. Just do it.
It has been a long process.
It has.
It may have been 2013 when we did this, because I think that's when I came back on the board. It was 2013. It's been a while. And we've done a Main Street study, Roger Street study that is still out there waiting for us.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. Is that a different document?
That didn't go as far as the proposal, which I have a working draft of, but nothing to go prime time yet. But there is a presentation that kind of concluded. It was about a lot of different things in downtown in terms of uses, and also organization. And it's actually, Gemma's been involved in an effort called the Local Rapid Recovery Planning Grant or Planning Program about, things like, does downtown, is there an advantage to creating Main Streets program or, some other entity to help move, some efforts along in terms of streetscape and beautification, other things. So it was almost like a precursor to that. Some things have, kind of come to fruition out of it. the permitting path for multifamily is still a big one for Main Street, and we've dealt with most of it through special permitting that has come out the other end positively, or 40B application for mixed use that's come out positively. But kind of getting to something that's a little bit more predictable, that deals with dimensions and setbacks and things that make sense for that district, and removing some of the barriers around the discussion that we just had in terms of height in the downtown area. So when we outlined this, we've got 2 successes under our wings. This and then downtown and the train station are the next 2.
Well, let's set 2 more meetings, one for Judy, which
Okay.
you can nail her down, but one for the dimensional stuff.
Okay. And
Do we have a planning board meeting on the 15th?
you have a regular planning board meeting on the 15th.
Okay.
And then the
Just
next,
a reminder.
Yep. And then August 5th would be the next. I am away the last full week in July.
So maybe the 22nd we could meet?
22nd. I have a commitment in the afternoon starting at 2:30. We could pick a different day of the week.
We
We
do
could
the,
say,
could we do the 21st?
21st is Wednesday.
do you think Gemma, I'm looking at Gemma. Do you think we're going to probably have something from 2 to 4 on that Wednesday as like a debrief? Because that'll be a week. How about, does the 20th work?
Yep.
Okay, why don't we say the 20th?
I mean, for me, how about Beverly?
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my calendar. I'm not looking at your faces.
That's right.
Um,
I can probably do it. I think I'll be on a cell phone, but I can definitely.
Oh, that's no fun. It's hard because
It's tough.
you can't look at the tables.
Cell phone.
Well, I can.
Yeah.
I can do it, but I'll do it remote because I'll be away, but I can do it.
I can
Well,
print out whatever.
What about the week of the 12th? I mean, I know it's next week. Is that too soon? I mean, Greg, there isn't any work you need to do between now and then. We just need to process.
well, the next time we meet, I'd like you to have the data.
Oh,
And
right.
Gemma has to do all this data, counting all the lots.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I mean, she's done a lot already, but I think that would make sense to have that as well. So ideally, we have a fair amount going on next week as well. So how about the 19th, Monday?
That
Fine with
works.
me. Is that better for
Okay.
you, Sean?
Yeah, if we do it later in the afternoon, that's good. I think I'm tied up until about 1, but anytime.
So
after
you
about
want
2
to
should be good.
try 2 again, or 2:30?
Can we do 2:30 just in case?
Yeah.
Is that-
Okay, so we'll go with 2:30 on the 19th. Okay. Sounds good. And we'll
you'll
see
send a
you.
link.
Yes,
send a
I'll
link.
send everything out, and we'll be populating the planning board drive for the meeting next Thursday, which has moderately sized agenda. So if there's nothing else for now, can make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll
Yeah, whatever. So moved.
Second, Sean second, and a roll call. Member Remsen,
Yes.
Member Henry,
Yes.
Member Book.
Yeah.
All right, well,
I
we
just
will,
want to thank behind the scenes Gemma over there.
Yeah.
For all your work. It's
Yes,
great
thank
to
you.
have you on board. So, and
Well,
you
helpful-
didn't say much,
mean-
but
I smile a lot, but I think I'm smiling more lately.
But for 2 reasons, for both experience and capacity.
thanks,
So
Gemma.
that Greg
And
doesn't have
if
to do
you have
everything.
anything to add, you should speak up too, because it sounds like you're the ones with the boots on the ground digging your hands into.
I'll let her walk you through all the numbers at the next meeting.
Okay, good.
All right, we'll see you
Thanks,
next week.
guys.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Very
Bye-bye, folks.
good.
Bye-bye.